let's get started. We are going to be cooking up some chicken. So let's get started. Before we slice into the chicken, I want us to prep our pan so it's all ready. What we're going to do is take a big baking tray, line the bottom with aluminum foil, and then we're going to take some cooling racks and set it on top. And what that does for us is the aluminum foil is on the bottom to make cleanup a lot easier later, because there will be some fat and grease dripping from the chicken, and scrubbing it off the pan later is just a huge pain. If we have aluminum foil, we can just recycle the foil. The cooling racks give us some air pockets underneath where the chicken's going to sit, and so it allows more even cooking of the chicken, and that's why we've got that layering going on. In general, if you're cooking stuff in a baking tray and it's super duper messy, it's a pretty good idea to use aluminum foil. When you need to decide between, say, aluminum foil and parchment paper, the way you end up making that decision is typically the temperature your oven's running at. Now, parchment paper, you usually don't want it at anything higher than 425. Aluminum foil can handle basically whatever you throw at it. And 425 for the metric folks is about 218 Celsius. So this is our pan, the cooling rack's on top, and then you can just set that aside so it's out of your way. Now we're going to move to the chicken. Okay, so normally you would do this step over a sink. I just got a big stainless steel bowl here to catch any drippings. There are a lot of debates as to whether or not you need to rinse your chickens. The last and best advice I've heard is rinsing your chicken actually exposes your kitchen to more bacteria than not rinsing it. Because when you rinse it in the sink, you get a lot of splatter of that water all over the rest of the sink, and that splatter can travel like 5 to 6 feet. So if you're trying to avoid bacteria contamination, rinsing it actually spreads more bacteria than not rinsing it. So usually your chicken on the inside is going to have a little baggie of some of the extra organs. Those are great for when you're making stock, or if you've got like a cat, they love raw chicken liver, like they go nuts for it. So I'm just getting all the drippings in there. I'm going to slide this bowl out of the way. And we've got our chicken here. You can stand them up if you really want to. But what's really important right now, and this one's got a little bit of a neck to it, so we'll get rid of that in a second. What's really important now is we want to actually dry our chicken. So we're just going to get some paper towels and pat it dry. There's nothing too crazy here. The reason we dry it is it helps the skin crisp up a lot more than if we just let it sit wet. We let it sit wet, our skin kind of steams more than it roasts. And we want some nice crispy skin on here. The next step, and this is the part you probably haven't seen before. So what we're going to be doing is we're actually cutting on either side of the spine from the chicken. We're going to remove the whole spine, flip it over, smash it down to crack the rib cage, and then we're going to season this. So we're opening up the whole chicken so that when we roast it, there's more surface area for the chicken to cook. So it cooks faster and more evenly, so we don't overcook the breast while undercook the leg, the thigh, because the breast is white meat or light meat, white meat. This is very low fat content because it's fast twitch muscle. It's typically what you're going to find in animals. If they've got fast twitch muscle, it's a lean meat, it's white meat. Slow twitch muscle, like their legs, because they have to flap their arms much faster than run with their legs. Slow twitch muscle, which is the thighs, has the dark meat. It's got a lot more fat in it. It's got a lot more flavor. It's a lot richer, but they cook at different rates and they need different temperatures. The breast meat, you want to hit 145 before it comes out of the oven, and the dark meat, you want to hit about 160. And if you just roast your chicken like this, it can be difficult to get both of those temperatures to happen at the same time. Often the white meat will overcook and the leg meat will not be cooked enough. So flip this bad boy over and be very careful to keep your hands on the opposite side of the spine when you're chopping into the chicken. So I'm going to turn this a little bit. So I'm just to the right of the spine. And I'm just slicing in here. There are bones you're chopping through, so you're going to hear some crunches, and that's totally expected. So that's one side, sliced through, very pretty. And then we're pulling the other side here. So just hold on to that little tail nub that's probably there, and just slice on the opposite side of that spine. Try to get as close to the spine as possible so that we're not wasting any extra meat here. And these are super sharp shears, so they do this very nicely. Your shears might not cut quite so nicely through this, depending on their sharpness. That's our spine. You don't have to throw this away. You can use this to make gravy for your to go with your chicken, or you can keep this and throw it in a freezer bag and build up chicken bits and bones and use it to make chicken stock later. I'm just keeping everything in my little chicken bowl over here for safety, so I don't cross-contaminate stuff. Oh, you know, I forgot one very important step. We need to preheat our ovens to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 230 Celsius. So this is kind of what our chicken looks like. It's not quite butterflied yet. There's one last step. And you'll notice that while it looks neat like this and it sits really nice and flat and our thighs are very exposed like this, we actually have to crush the rib cage. So the easiest way to do that, palm on the rib cage, just push down, and you'll hear some cracks, and that flattens your chicken. So now our chicken sits really nice and flat on that cutting board. Next step is we have to prep our chicken for seasoning. And here what we're going to be doing is we're going to be separating the skin from the meat. And it sounds complicated, it's actually really easy. So we're going to take the skin at the end here, and we're just gently sliding a finger underneath the skin here. The first bit is probably the trickiest. You can use a little bit of force, but you go through and you literally just separate the skin from the meat. And about halfway through, there's going to be a bit more of a membrane. It's a little thicker. It's fine. You can leave that. So you kind of have two different pockets. I'm going to do that on both sides. See what I was saying, where your fingers are going to get really chickeny here? Okay. And then once you get it on one side, we do the same thing. We just go from the tail end. We just want to make sure that basically our fingers can meet in the middle here. And that's how we know we've loosened up the skin enough. Because we're going to be tossing some seasoning in here, mostly salt and pepper. But we salt and pepper on top of the skin and underneath it so that everything gets seasoned nicely. You can also come in here and kind of get to the thigh meat a little bit if you so desire. I'm going to wash my hands really quick. All right, clean hands again. So what I like to use is a small ramekin. You can just use a small bowl. What we're going to do is put the amount of seasoning we kind of expect to go onto the chicken in here so that we can keep going back and forth from the chicken to the seasoning and not cross-contaminate with, say, your pepper grinder or your salt cellar. And if you put extra in, it's fine. Pepper and salt isn't all that expensive, so you're not breaking the bank by quote-unquote wasting. So I'm just eyeballing this. It's probably, I want to say 3 tablespoons or so of salt in this ramekin, and probably half a tablespoon of black pepper, maybe a whole tablespoon even. That's what my mix looks like. So we'll set that aside. So we're going to start with our olive oil. So we're just going to pour some olive oil over the top of the chicken. Not a whole lot, just enough so that we can wipe it down with our hands and give it kind of an even coating. There's the oven. Now it's preheated. Okay. So this is going to help the browning a little bit. It also helps the seasoning stick onto the chicken a little bit better, and just try to cover all the surfaces. Another little tip here, you'll notice for the most part, I'm using one hand, so my right hand, for touching the chicken, and my left hand as much as possible for trying to avoid touching the chicken. So I've got a clean hand and a dirty hand. So I've got the messy hand and then the clean hand. And so if I end up realizing I forgot to grab something, or if I need to change the setting on the oven or whatever, I've got this clean hand still to touch things, and I don't have to worry about cross-contamination. And then we're going to sprinkle our seasoning on top. You can kind of pat this in so it really sticks. And you can be fairly generous since we're only seasoning the outside of the meat, right? This isn't ground meat. The seasoning's not mixed all the way in. It's just on the outside of the bird. And then once you season the outside, you'll see why we open up the inside here. So I'm going to stand this guy up and kind of give you a better angle here. So I'm going to kind of hold this open, and then I'm just going to sprinkle some more of the seasoning through the opening up here, and then in a second I'll spread it around with my chicken hand. So we actually have seasoning on both the top and on the inside, right up against the skin. And this helps us with a couple things. One, it gets more seasoning throughout the bird. It gets that salt and pepper right up onto the skin so that it's going to be there later. The other thing is it helps create just a little bit more of an air pocket between the meat and the skin, and that helps the skin dry out a little bit more and get nice and crispy when we are roasting it. And if you're just getting both hands dirty, this is a lot easier than if you're trying to keep one clean hand. You can actually take chunks of butter and put it underneath the skin as well, which I sometimes like to do. So this is not necessary if for some reason you're crazy and you don't like butter. So I'm just going to get my hands dirty here. Just put a chunk of butter up in there. It's fine. Put some at the top, and then I'm going to put some at the bottom too. Kind of tuck them off to the side so it's near the thighs. So you can 100% see where those chunks of butter are, and that's totally fine. Big old chunks, probably about half a tablespoon in each of those chunks, in case you were looking to do the same. Not necessary. You'll still get a really phenomenal chicken without doing that, but I'm always a big fan of adding more butter when we can. The underside of the bird, this is almost all bone, right? This is where the rib cage is. This is where you can feel right here the kind of like the sternum or the chest bone of the chicken is. And so most of this, the meat's going to be taken off of. So if you season this side, it won't really do much for you. Yeah, so we are almost ready to throw this in the oven. All we really got to do at this point is transfer this to that pan we prepared. So just pick up the chicken, drop it on the pan, like so. Ta-da! Cool. So you should all have this model, which makes things nice and easy for us. There's tons of different models that are leave-in models that allow you to set an alarm for what temperature you want on your chicken. And I'll give you guys a sec. Get ready. So in order to set the alarm on this, so that the top number is the current temperature, and the bottom number, it might not even be on, it might just say off. To turn on and off the alarm setting on here, you push both of these little arrows at the same time, and you'll see a little number at the bottom. And then you just hit right and left to get to the temperature you're aiming for. On the chicken here, we're aiming for 145 Fahrenheit, which is 163 Celsius. And then what we're going to end up doing is we're going to insert the probe into the breast meat. We're aiming for the thickest part of the meat near the bone, but not touching any of the bone. If we touch the bone ends up getting much hotter than the meat or the protein, so it gives us a false reading. So I'm going to come in from this side because I'm going to be throwing in the pan from this direction, and it gives me the most length for my table. And I'm just going to slide in at an angle. I'm aiming for the thickest part. Should be about there. I'm not hitting the bone. I'm not punching all the way through to the other side, which can sometimes happen if you just go all the way through and your probe is exposed to air on the other side. You're going to get a false reading. And then we just put this guy into our oven. Kind of cool is with this temperature probe, it'll tell you exactly what the temperature is on your chicken right now. So this is 51 degrees currently where that probe is in the chicken, and we'll see how that temperature increases over time as it's cooking. So I'm just going to set this off to the side and let that go, and it's going to beep at me once we hit that 145. And here, yeah, that looks pretty good. Looks really good. Let's see if I can get a good shot for you here. So we've got good color on there, and got some good, it looks like some good crispy skin. I'm going to keep checking the temp. There's one or two more spots. So I use the same brand for a little handheld thermometer as I sent all of you guys, because their products are just so damn good. Okay. Okay, so I've got a little spot there that's actually 135. 130. Okay, so I'm going to reposition my other probe, which will probably be hot. So use a towel and aim to get to that cold spot and make sure I'm measuring against that. Nope, too far. So I'm just looking at the probe meter and trying to move the probe until it gets to the coldest spot. So 137's pretty good. So I'll throw this back in for a few more minutes till we hit that 145 temp. Because I know what the internal temperature is supposed to be for that chicken, I can tell confidently whether or not it's done. But if all I was going off of was the time, I wouldn't actually have any idea whether or not the chicken was done. And I'd have to start doing things like slicing into the meat and hoping that visually I can tell the difference based on color. But based off of what I shared with you about resting times, if you slice into the meat to check the color, what we're doing is we're allowing all the juices that were in that meat to leak out with force while it's still cooking. So then we end up with dry chicken because we wanted to see if it was done enough and safe. And by doing that, we then let all the juices flow out. So a little hole from a temperature probe isn't going to allow nearly so much juice to come out. It allows us to feel very confident that the food we're making is totally done. Once you start getting past 100, like as I was saying before, it's not quite a logarithmic or exponential growth of speed, but you'll find that the temperature will go up faster and faster the higher you get in temperature. So it won't be too much longer for you. This, I'm feeling very confident that we are at the right temp for the chicken. So what I'm going to do is temp this. So what's cool is I'm going to leave this temperature probe in because I took the chicken out at 145, and you'll see it's 149 right now. And we're going to check that again in a couple of minutes. What's really kind of cool about, where did that table go? What's really cool about this, when you leave the probe in, is it shows you exactly what's happening with your meat. And you will actually see that as your meat sits, it continues to cook, and it actually continues to get hotter for a few minutes still. I'll just angle it out a little more. So, partially because the probe's still in, I'm just going to give really big chunks of aluminum foil on here. Again, if we aren't looking for a tight feel, we're just trying to hold on to some of that heat that the chicken still has in it. And because the pan's hot, I'm just throwing a towel over the top so I can kind of curl it over the edges without burning my fingers. But that's as far as you need to go. You don't need to get really picky with it. It's loosely tinted with foil. And you can see this is up to 152 now. So the internal temperature of your chicken will continue to rise, and this happens with any meat when we let it sit for a few minutes. And this is when we've got our 10 minutes of resting. allows that chicken to keep cooking without losing extra moisture, and so that it hits those perfect internal temperatures that we're aiming for a perfectly cooked piece of chicken that isn't super dry and isn't undercooked.